Okay, so I remember that period of my life pretty vividly, mostly because it felt like I was stuck in perpetual beige. My job was fine, good pay, good benefits, but it was just fine. Every morning it was the same commute, the same cubicle farm, the same lukewarm coffee from the break room machine. I'd come home to my perfectly adequate, utterly uninspiring suburban house, eat a perfectly adequate dinner, and spend my evenings scrolling through Zillow, dreaming of something more. I wasn't looking for a mansion or a sprawling estate with a polo field. My dream was much simpler: space, room to breathe, room to tinker with my truck without bothering the neighbors, maybe even room for a couple of goats if I was feeling ambitious. Just a place where the biggest sound wasn't the distant drone of traffic or Mrs. Henderson's yappy poodle next door. I wanted dirt, trees, and quiet. For months, it was the same routine. Weekend mornings would start with a fresh pot of coffee, my laptop open, and a new batch of real estate listings to pore over. Most of them were either way out of my budget, too close to civilization, or just wrong. You know that feeling when you look at 100 houses and none of them click? Like they're just boxes, not homes. That was me for a long, long time. My realtor, a good-natured guy named Mike, who was probably getting sick of my particular brand of pickiness, would send me links, and I'd politely decline. Too much HOA, too small a lot, looks like the kind of place where people complain if your grass is a millimeter too long. Yeah, I had some specific aversions. Then, one Tuesday, buried deep in an email from Mike, there it was. A single photo, a weathered but sturdy-looking farmhouse, partially obscured by a stand of mature oaks, with what looked like acres of open pasture stretching out behind it. The listing read, "Secluded ranch property, not in HOA." My heart actually did a little thump. Not in HOA? That was like music to my ears. I immediately called Mike. "Tell me everything about the ranch," I said, probably sounding a little too eager. He chuckled. The old Miller place. Been on and off the market for a bit. It's got some quirks, definitely needs work. But the land, man, the land is incredible. And you're right, totally outside any covenants or restrictions. It's truly rural." The next Saturday, I drove out there. It was a bit of a drive, past the sprawling, meticulously manicured entrance to what everyone just called the Preserve, one of those huge master-planned communities with gates and perfectly uniform mailboxes, and naturally, a very active HOA. I paid no mind to it. My GPS was taking me further down a less-traveled county road. Eventually, I turned onto what felt less like a road and more like a glorified dirt track, winding through fields until it opened up to the old Miller place. It wasn't perfect. The paint was peeling, the barn leaned a bit to the left, and the driveway was a potholed mess. But the moment I stepped out of my truck, I knew. The air smelled of fresh earth and pine. The only sound was the wind rustling through the leaves and some distant birdsong. There was a quiet, peaceful solitude that I hadn't realized how desperately I craved. It had a well, a septic tank, and its own unique charm. It was everything I'd been looking for, every single box checked, especially that not an HOA one. Mike met me there, clipboard in hand. We walked the property for hours, talked about the well water, the potential for a new fence, the septic system, the electrical. He pointed out the boundary lines, explained how the property connected to the county road system, emphasizing that this specific road, while a bit rustic, was the access point, and it was legally recognized as such. It was all so clear, so straightforward. My attorney reviewed everything twice, triple-checking the deeds, easements, and property lines. Everything was above board, no red flags, zero. The buying process itself was fairly painless. We made an offer, they accepted, and a few weeks later, after all the inspections and paperwork, I was sitting at a big conference table, signing my name more times than I thought humanly possible. The key exchange felt momentous. I was officially a ranch owner. I remember driving away from the closing, feeling this incredible sense of accomplishment and anticipation. Finally, after all those years of staring at beige walls, I had a place that was truly mine, off the grid, free from the dictates of some overzealous neighborhood committee. I spent the next few days planning renovations, dreaming up chicken coops and garden beds. I was so excited to finally move in, to leave the suburban predictability behind and embrace the quiet, simple life I'd worked so hard for. I had no idea that my peaceful new beginning was about to become ground zero for a full-blown war with an HOA I didn't even belong to. And it would all hinge on that little dirt road, the one I hadn't given a second thought to beyond its practical purpose. So, there I was, maybe a month into owning my new ranch, and honestly, life felt pretty good. After years of dealing with neighborhood watch emails, landscaping mandates, and all the petty power plays of HOA living, finally buying a spread out in the boonies felt like pure, unadulterated freedom. I'd spent the morning out checking the perimeter fences, enjoying the quiet, just soaking up the fact that every single acre under my boots was mine. No committees, no architectural review boards, no busybody neighbors. Just me, the land, and the occasional curious deer. Then I heard it, a car. Not just any car, but one that seemed to be traveling way too fast down the long, unpaved gravel road that actually sliced right through the middle of my property. It yelled to a halt maybe 50 yards from where I was leaning against a fence post, and I frowned. I hadn't given anyone permission to be back here. Out of the driver's side, a woman stomped, mid-50s perhaps, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair that probably hadn't seen a bad hair day since the 90s, and a designer sundress that looked utterly ridiculous against the dusty backdrop of a working ranch. Her face was already flushed, arms crossed, practically radiating indignation. I straightened up, a bit bewildered. Was she lost? Did her car break down? I just stared at her, then back at my fence post, waiting for her to make the first move. She didn't disappoint. "What do you think you're doing?" she practically shrieked, her voice carrying clear across the morning air. I blinked. My initial thought was, "Lady, I'm standing on my own land." But I tried to be polite. "Can I help you, ma'am?" She scoffed, a truly magnificent theatrical scoff. "Help me? Sir, you are trespassing, or worse, damaging HOA property." She pointed vaguely at the fence line I was inspecting. My eyebrows practically disappeared into my hairline. HOA property? Ma'am, this is my property. I just bought the Oak Haven Ranch last month. I gestured around. All of this, from that gate down there all the way to the county road. She actually snorted. "I don't care what you bought. This road, this private access road, belongs to the Ridgeview Estates HOA. You can't just block it." She ended with a furious stomp of her designer sandal. Block it? I hadn't blocked anything. I was just on my land. I hadn't even put up a new fence yet, just fixing the old one. "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "this gravel path runs straight through the middle of the Oak Haven property, which, again, I own. And it's not part of any HOA, nor does it have an easement." Her face turned a deeper shade of red. "Don't be ridiculous. The HOA has used this access for 20 years. It's our only convenient route to town. It's our road. It's been implied." "It's customary. We've always used it. You can't just take away our right-of-way." She was practically vibrating with fury now, gesticulating wildly towards the path. My jaw almost hit the dirt. Implied? Customary? That's not how property law works, lady. I felt a slow burn of annoyance starting to simmer. This wasn't just a confused neighbor. This was an entitled one. "With all due respect, ma'am, when I closed on this property, the survey clearly showed the boundaries. This road, from that gate all the way down to the county road, is entirely within my deeded land. And there's no easement for the HOA on record, anywhere." That's when she really went full Karen. She puffed out her chest, pointed a manicured finger directly at my face, and leaned in. "You think you can just waltz in here, some city slicker buying up land, and tell us, the residents of Ridgeview, what we can and can't do? We'll see about that. I'm on the HOA board, young man, and we have lawyers. You won't get away with this. I just stood there, watching her tirade. Young man? Lawyers? HOA board? It was all coming together. My peaceful ranch life had just been interrupted by the exact kind of person I'd moved out here to avoid. She wasn't just misinformed, she was determined to bully me into giving up my property rights. And in that moment, as the annoyance curdled into a cold, hard resolve, I knew one thing for sure: this was going to be a problem. But it wasn't going to be my problem. Not in the way she thought, anyway. I just gave her a calm, steady look. We'll see indeed, ma'am. We'll see. Ma'am, I haven't touched a thing on the road, I told her, patiently, perhaps too patiently. I just moved in. I was planning on grading it next month, maybe some fresh gravel, but that's about it. Nothing's been done yet. She narrowed her eyes, then looked past me, scanning my property with a gaze so disapproving it felt like it was physically shrinking my ranch. Yes, well, that's precisely the problem. Any work on that road needs HOA approval, and frankly, your property taxes are due for adjustment given the amount of through traffic you'll be generating for our residents. It's an undue burden. And that's when a little red flag, no, a huge flapping scarlet banner started waving wildly in my brain. Property taxes? HOA approval for my driveway? This made absolutely no sense. I'd done my due diligence when buying the ranch. Hours spent poring over documents, plat maps, zoning regulations. I knew, explicitly, definitively, that this property was not part of any HOA. That was one of the big selling points, actually. The promise of freedom from exactly this kind of petty, self-important bureaucracy. Mrs. Jenkins, I started, trying to keep my voice even, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. I think there might be a misunderstanding. This property, my ranch, it's not part of the West Ridge Homeowners Association. She actually laughed. Not a friendly, amused chuckle, but a derisive, almost hostile scoff that was borderline offensive. Her head even tilted back slightly, like she found my statement utterly adorable in its naivete. Oh, please, don't be ridiculous. Of course it is. All properties surrounding the development are subject to HOA covenants, especially those that provide communal access points. It's a matter of practicality and common sense. My patience, which was already running on fumes after days of backbreaking unpacking, was wearing thin, eroding faster than beach sand in a hurricane. No, it isn't. I checked. My deed, my survey, my title insurance, everything clearly states this property is outside the HOA's jurisdiction. It's entirely independent. No HOA fees, no HOA rules, no HOA anything. I was starting to articulate each word with deliberate force, the friendly facade crumbling. Her face went from annoyed to positively indignant, a vein practically throbbing in her forehead. Impossible! How else would we access half the homes in the West Ridge community if not through that road? That road has always been the way in. It's practically a public thoroughfare. It's been used by our residents for decades. And then it clicked. The access road, the one that cut through my property, running right alongside my actual private driveway, the one that continued on to what must be the back half of their precious West Ridge development. I'd seen it on the survey, of course, a thin, dotted line, but hadn't really registered its full significance beyond thinking, weird road placement, wonder what that's for. Now I knew, and a cold, hard realization settled in my gut. Ma'am, I said, letting a bit of the bewilderment and a whole lot of dawning incredulity seep into my tone, that road, that access road you are talking about, the one the HOA uses, that road is on my property. It is private land, my private land. The look on her face was absolutely priceless. It was a masterpiece of human emotion, a volatile cocktail of shock, utter disbelief, and pure, unadulterated outrage. Her jaw literally dropped, then snapped shut. Her eyes bulged. It was like I had just told her the sky was green and she needed to pay me for breathing the air. "That is absolutely preposterous," she shrieked, her voice suddenly much louder, sharper, echoing across my still empty front yard and bouncing off the surrounding trees. "That road has been there for decades. It is on every single map. It is the only way for half our residents to get to their homes. You cannot just claim it." "And it is on my survey, Mrs. Jenkins," I countered, feeling a defiant smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth, fighting it back. "Right through the middle of my parcel. It is my land, all mine, with no recorded public or private easements benefiting your HOA. She took a furious step closer, invading my personal space, her perfectly manicured finger wagging precariously close to my nose. "You think you can just buy a property and suddenly claim an established access route as your own private road? That is not how this works, young man. We have an easement. We must have an easement. It is a legal necessity." I shook my head slowly, deliberately. "No, you do not. I checked for easements. Thoroughly. There are none recorded for public access or for the Westridge HOA. If there were, believe me, I would not have bought the property, or at the very least, it would have been a significant point of negotiation and factored into the price." The implication was clear. You screwed up, not me. This sent her spiraling. She started pacing rapidly on my porch, a frantic, rapid-fire string of complaints, accusations, and outright threats tumbling out of her mouth. "This is an outrage, an absolute travesty. Do you know what this means? Do you have any idea the chaos this will cause for our community? We will take you to court. The HOA has ample legal funds. We will tie you up in litigation for years. You cannot just cut off half our community from their homes." She was gesticulating wildly now, her face a blotchy red, her composure completely gone. I just stood there, arms crossed, listening to her increasingly histrionic rant, the initial confusion and frustration curdling into a slow, burning anger deep inside me. I had bought this place for peace and quiet, for space, for freedom from exactly this kind of small-minded, entitled drama. And here, on day 7 of ownership, I had a self-appointed HOA dictator screaming legal threats at me over a road on my private property that she somehow, inexplicably, thought she owned. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement was breathtaking. It was a masterclass in audacity. "Mrs. Jenkins," I finally cut her off, my voice much colder now, all traces of politeness long gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "I bought this property fair and square. I am not part of your HOA, and that road, whether you like it or not, is on my private land. As far as I am concerned, anyone using it without my permission is trespassing." Her mouth snapped shut with an audible click, eyes wide with disbelief at my sheer audacity. She recoiled slightly. "Trespassing? You would not dare. You cannot just block it off. This is extortion. We will have the county on you. You cannot disrupt essential access. It is a public utility." "Essential access that is running through my private property without a recorded easement?" I calmly corrected her, feeling the cold, hard logic settle in my gut, solidifying my stance. This was not just about a trivial road anymore. This was about principle. This was about some entitled person trying to dictate what I could and could not do on my own, legally owned land. She scoffed again, a louder, more aggressive sound this time, her face contorting in disgust. "You think you are so clever, do not you? Trying to strong-arm us, the entire community. Well, let me tell you, Mr. Smith, this is not over, not by a long shot. The HOA will convene an emergency meeting, and you will hear from our lawyers first thing Monday morning. You have no idea who you are messing with." With that final venomous shot, she spun on her heel, her linen top swishing dramatically as she stomped off my porch, down my driveway, and headed back towards her HOA-controlled kingdom. She did not even bother to close my gate, just left it swinging idly in the breeze, a final disrespectful flourish. I watched her go, a knot of pure exasperation and indignation tightening in my chest, a pressure building behind my eyes. The thought of this woman and her entire HOA trying to dictate terms for my land, threatening me with expensive, drawn-out lawsuits, it was absolutely infuriating. But beneath the anger, a different thought, a really satisfying, slightly mischievous, and immensely powerful thought started to form and solidify. "You have no idea who you are messing with," she had thrown at me. "Oh, Karen." "Deborah, I think you have absolutely no idea. Because if that road truly had no easement and it was entirely on my private property, well then I knew exactly what I could do. And the seeds of my master plan, the one that would not only protect my property rights, but also turn her perfectly coiffed blonde bob into a wild, disheveled mess of pure, unadulterated outrage, were officially planted right there on my porch. My frustration was boiling, yes, but it was boiling towards a very specific, very retaliatory purpose. This was not just a conflict heating up, it was a powder keg being lit, and I was holding the match. And I had a permit to operate heavy machinery. Okay, so picture this. I just spent a solid hour with the county planning department, dotting every I and crossing every T, making absolutely sure that my property rights were ironclad. The official no trespassing signs were up, the heavy-duty chain was strung across the old gravel path that Homeowners Association Karen and her cronies considered their private highway, and the new lock was gleaming ominously. I had even parked my pickup truck just off to the side, strategically positioned so anyone trying to move the barrier would have a real problem. I was ready. I even had my phone set to record, just in case. Call it paranoia, call it experience with Homeowners Association Karen. And wouldn't you know it, I hadn't even finished tightening the last bolt on the private property sign when the cavalry arrived. Or rather, the suburban assault vehicle arrived. Karen's giant sport utility vehicle, gleaming white and utterly pristine, rounded the bend, followed by a couple of other cars filled with what I presumed were her most loyal Homeowners Association sycophants. They yelled to a halt maybe 50 feet from the barrier, and before her engine was even off, the door flew open and out she stomped. Her face was already a shade of puce usually reserved for overripe tomatoes, and her perfectly coiffed blonde hair was, for once, a little disheveled, probably from the speed at which she'd driven. She was wearing one of those designer tracksuits that clearly cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and she was practically vibrating with fury. "What in the actual hell do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice echoing across the quiet ranchland. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the chain, then at the signs, then at me. Her companions, a couple of middle-aged women and a nervous-looking man, spilled out of their cars, looking a mixture of curious and horrified. Some already had their phones out, though I doubted they were filming me. I just leaned back against my truck, crossing my arms, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. "Well, Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm, almost too calm, "as you can plainly see, I'm securing my property. This is my land now. My access road, and it's private." "Private?" she roared, taking a few more steps forward, almost tripping over a loose stone. "This road has been used by the residents of Okeeman Estates for 30 years. You can't just close it off. It's our only way to the main road." "Funny," I replied, my smile widening a fraction. "I seem to recall mentioning that little detail to the entire Homeowners Association board during our last meeting. Repeatedly, in fact. I also recall being told repeatedly that the Homeowners Association had no jurisdiction over my back 40 and that I should just deal with it. So here I am, dealing with it." Her eyes narrowed to slits. "You manipulative little schemer. You did this on purpose. You bought that land just to spite us." "Now, Karen," I said, pushing off the truck and walking a few steps closer, but still keeping a respectful distance from her explosive aura. I bought the land because it's beautiful, it's got great potential, and frankly, I like not having to deal with the homeowners association. The road closure? That's just a happy coincidence of property law and inconvenient access. A very legal coincidence. I gestured to the shiny new no trespassing signs. County approved, I might add. She stood there, speechless for a moment, her chest heaving. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the realization dawning that I wasn't bluffing, that I wasn't just being difficult. This was real. The air crackled with her barely contained rage. Her fellow homeowners association members were looking from her to me, then at the road, their faces a mixture of dawning horror and uncomfortable curiosity. One of the women subtly put her phone away. Smart move. Then it happened. The dam broke. "You can't do this," she shrieked, a sound that probably startled the deer halfway across my ranch. Her face was completely crimson now, spittle flying from her lips. "This is an outrage. You are ruining our community. Our property values will plummet. We'll be trapped. You're a monster." She started stomping her foot, a ridiculously childish display for a woman in her late 40s. Then she marched right up to the chain, grabbing it with both hands and tugging violently. The heavy steel links barely even vibrated. She pulled again, grunting with effort, her perfectly manicured nails probably doing damage. Open it now, you inconsiderate jerk," she screamed, yanking again, as if sheer force of will could unlatch a padlocked chain. "I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the news. You haven't seen the last of this." I just watched her, completely unflappable, though inside I was doing a victory dance. This was exactly what I'd expected, and honestly, it was even better than I'd imagined. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement radiating off her was a sight to behold. It was pure, distilled Karen. "Go right ahead, Karen," I said, a little too sweetly. "Call everyone you want. My lawyer already reviewed everything. The county confirmed it. The deed is clear. This road is legally, undeniably, 100% mine, and I'm not opening it, ever." That's when she completely lost it. She let go of the chain, threw her hands up in the air, and let out this guttural, frustrated scream that could have shattered glass. Her eyes were wild, darting around as if looking for someone, anyone, to validate her outrage. Her face crumpled, and for a terrifying second, I thought she might actually cry. Instead, she just stood there, hyperventilating, her designer tracksuit suddenly looking ridiculous against the backdrop of raw fury. "You'll regret this. You'll regret the day you ever thought you could mess with the Oak Haven Estates Homeowners Association," she spat, her voice raspy now. She started pacing back and forth in front of the chain, a caged lioness, but a lioness in a suburban jungle. "This isn't a legal blockade. It's a human rights violation." Human rights violation? Ugh, the irony. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from outright laughing. The other HOA members were now visibly shrinking back, clearly embarrassed, one woman even covering her mouth with her hand. This wasn't the dignified protest they'd signed up for. This was a public breakdown. Just then, I heard the faint wail of a siren in the distance. Ah, perfect timing. I glanced at my phone, still discreetly recording. I had a feeling the police would be far more interested in her current performance than any illegal blockade claims. "Karen," I said, my voice cutting through her frantic pacing, "maybe it's time to call it a day before the officers get here." She stopped dead in her tracks, eyes wide, seeing the flashing blue lights now visible over the trees. She looked at me, then at the chain, then at her mortified companions, then back at me, as if only now comprehending the full scope of her defeat. The fight seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a desperate, trapped animal look. But even then, she couldn't let it go. "You haven't won," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper, though still laced with venom. "This isn't over." I just shrugged, a small, triumphant smile firmly in place. For this road, Karen, It absolutely is. And as the first patrol car pulled up, bathing the scene in its blue and red glow, I knew I had every single bit of evidence I needed, both legal and visual, to make sure it stayed that way. And a hell of a story for later. So, after I put up that fence and those private property signs, effectively cutting off their only paved access to the main road, the fireworks began. And let me tell you, it was a spectacular display. The initial calls to the sheriff were immediate and constant, but the deputies, bless their cotton socks, just drove up, looked at my perfectly legal property markers, talked to me for about 5 minutes, and then politely informed the angry mob, spearheaded, of course, by HOA Karen, that this was a civil matter, not a criminal one. My land, my rules. Karen, naturally, didn't take that well. Her face was a shade of purple I didn't think was naturally possible outside of a bruise. She was absolutely apoplectic, shrieking about property rights, about inconvenience, about how I was ruining their lives. As if my life hadn't been a living hell of passive-aggressive notes and unwarranted complaints since the day I bought the ranch. The whole neighborhood was in chaos. Cars backed up, people trying to figure out how to get to work without driving through the muddy, unpaved back route that was now their only option. And honestly, I just watched from my porch with a cup of coffee. It was beautiful. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen and the HOA weren't going to roll over and play dead. The legal letters started flying within hours. Cease and desist, demand letters, threats of injunctions, damages, you name it. They were throwing everything they had at me, convinced they had an open and shut case. After all, they'd been using that road for decades. It just had to be theirs, right? Wrong. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah, just chuckled when I forwarded her the stack of increasingly irate emails and official-looking documents. "They're bluffing, Mark," she said, her voice calm and steady, a welcome contrast to the hurricane of Karen's wrath. They never actually filed an easement, not properly, not legally. They just assumed. That word, assumed, was the key. For decades, the HOA board had just assumed the original developer had sorted out the access road. They assumed that because it was always there and always paved, and everyone used it, it must be legitimate. They were wrong. The original development plans, buried deep in county archives, showed that the road was indeed planned, but the necessary easement across my property was never formally recorded or transferred. It was an oversight, a massive administrative screw-up from 50 years ago that nobody had bothered to correct. Until now. Until I bought the land, did my due diligence, and discovered their dirty little secret. The actual legal process was a slow, grinding machine, but it was incredibly satisfying to watch. Karen, meanwhile, was a constant, buzzing irritant. She'd show up at county meetings, at court dates, even tried to accost me outside Sarah's office. "You can't do this, Mark. You're going to jail. We're going to sue you for everything you own," she'd scream, her voice cracking with fury and desperation. I just smiled. "We'll see about that, Karen." Sarah systematically dismantled their arguments. Their lawyer, who frankly seemed utterly bewildered by the mess he'd inherited, tried every angle. Prescriptive easement, adverse possession, easement by necessity, each one got shot down. The original developer was long gone. The original agreements were either non-existent or completely lacked the proper legal framework for an easement on my specific parcel. It was truly astounding how complacent the HOA had been. They'd never even thought to check. The turning point came during mediation. The judge, bless his patience, had basically told them to sort it out or he'd make a ruling that would likely not be in their favor. Karen was there, of course, radiating pure venom. She kept interrupting, trying to explain her side of things, her feelings about the injustice. Sarah just calmly presented the mountain of evidence, my deed, the lack of any recorded easement, the historical land surveys, everything. The HOA board members, who had initially been standing by Karen, started to look increasingly pale. Their lawyer was visibly sweating. He leaned over and whispered something to the board president, who then turned to Karen, shaking his head. "Mrs. Henderson," the board president said, his voice quiet but firm, "our legal counsel advises that we do not have a case." Karen lost it. Again. "What do you mean you don't have a case? He's blocking our road. He's a menace. This is an outrage." But her words just hung in the air, hollow and impotent. The legal reality was crushing her fantasy. The truth was, I wasn't blocking their road. I was blocking a road that happened to be on my land, and they had no legal right to use it. The final ruling was unequivocal. I had every right to close off my property. The HOA had absolutely no legal claim to an easement. Zero, zilch, nada. The judge strongly suggested that the HOA find an alternative solution for their residents. And by strongly suggested, he meant, you guys are in a world of hurt and this guy just won. The fallout for the HOA was immense. They had two options: either buy the strip of land from me at a price I dictated, which, let's be honest, would have been astronomical just on principle, or build a brand new access road. They eventually opted for the latter. It was their only financially viable choice, and even then, it cost them a fortune. They had to reroute an entire section of their entire road system, buy a new sliver of land from a different neighbor who, unlike me, was happy to sell at a fair price, and then pay for all the surveying, engineering, and construction. It took months of heavy machinery rumbling through their pristine, manicured development, months of orange construction cones, dust, and detours, months of residents complaining to the HOA about the noise, the inconvenience, and the skyrocketing HOA fees needed to pay for it all. And Karen? Oh, Karen was a sight to behold. She remained utterly convinced that I was Satan incarnate, but her power was gone. Her credibility with the other residents had vanished. She was just a bitter, angry woman who had led her community down a very expensive, very humiliating dead end. I saw her once, driving the long, circuitous new route, glaring daggers at my ranch from her car. I just waved, a big, friendly, victorious wave. The satisfaction was immense, not just because I won, but because I had stood my ground against relentless entitlement and came out on top. My ranch was finally peaceful. No more drive-by glares, no more unofficial shortcut traffic, just the quiet hum of my own land and the sweet, sweet sound of justice being served. Every time I look at that old, unused paved section of road on my property, now just slowly becoming overgrown with grass, I crock a smile. It's a monument to the day a stubborn rancher taught an entitled HOA Karen a lesson she and her entire community would never forget. And honestly, it was worth every single second. So yeah, that whole thing with HOA Karen and the access road, honestly, it still feels a little surreal to talk about. Like, did that really happen? Did a grown woman genuinely believe she had a right to my private property just because her HOA had been using it for decades without permission? The audacity, man. The sheer unmitigated audacity. After I put up those no trespassing signs and those heavy-duty, absolutely unmovable gates and made sure the sheriff's department was fully aware of the situation, just for good measure, there was this strange quiet. It was almost unsettling. I'd braced myself for an immediate full-scale assault, a legion of pitchfork-wielding HOA members at my property line, probably led by Karen herself, screaming about property values and inconvenience. But nothing. Not a peep for a few days. Then the emails started trickling in. Not to me, mind you, but to my ranch manager, then to my lawyer. Threatening legal action, demanding immediate access, citing some obscure easement they swore existed but couldn't for the life of them actually produce. It was almost comical. My lawyer, God bless him, just kept forwarding them to me with a single emoji. He had a field day shutting them down. Every single attempt, every single strongly worded letter met with a firm, polite, "Your clients are trespassing, cease and desist." And Karen? Oh, Karen. She was, predictably, the most vocal in their internal HOA communications, which somehow kept finding their way to my inbox. Apparently, she was spearheading the charge to sue me. She was convinced I was somehow infringing upon their rights. Their right to convenience, I guess? The best part was when an anonymous source within the HOA, a sane individual, bless their soul, sent me a screenshot of Karen's rant in their private forum. She was proposing a GoFundMe to raise money for a legal battle, claiming I was holding the entire community hostage. Hostage? I just bought a ranch and secured my own land. The level of self-delusion was astonishing. I printed that screenshot and framed it, not gonna lie. It sits right next to a really nice picture of my horses. The HOA eventually had to, actually build a proper access road on their own property. Took them months, cost them a fortune in special assessments, and caused a whole lot of internal strife. I heard through the grapevine that Karen actually got voted out of her board position. Imagine that. The very person who insisted on clinging to a non-existent right ended up costing her neighbors a massive amount of money and creating more inconvenience than if they just built their own road from the start. Me? I just enjoyed the peace and quiet. My property value, funnily enough, went up. The privacy was unparalleled. And that old access road, the one they used to take for granted? It's now a lovely, winding trail for me and my dogs, completely free of entitled suburbanites in their SUVs. Sometimes, late at night, I still shake my head. The sheer entitlement, the absolute conviction that their convenience trumped my property rights. It's a prime example of how some people operate, isn't it? They live in their own little bubble of perceived privilege, and when reality finally intrudes, they don't just deny it, they declare war on it. But hey, at least I got a great story out of it, and a very private, very beautiful ranch road. Worth every bit of the initial headache. Absolutely.